love your own enemies, don't be loving mine. My enemies are the theocratic fascists. I don't love them. I want to destroy them.
Child made in the image of God. Oh no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman.
So yeah, I've been, I keep doing this to this camera. There it is. I've been putting a lot of stuff up about Jesus not existing. You know, it would be good to first present some kind of evidence that isn't hearsay. But anyway, I thought for a change, instead of making a video about Jesus not existing, I would put one up about, let's just pretend that he does, that he did, okay? Though Christians would say that he still does in ghost form, but whatever. Okay, so what about Jesus? There's a chapter, speaking of Dan Barker, in his book Godless. And Dan Barker, again, is a former missionary and healer. He was a faith healer, and he was a evangelical preacher. And this book is called How an Evangelical Preacher. I just like saying that word, evangelical. It's kind of fun. Evangelical preacher became one of America's leading atheists, and his book is called Godless. And probably, I'm not sure if this is just a different title for the book Losing Faith in Faith, but Losing Faith in Faith is the first Dan Barker book that I bought, and that's the one that pretty much toppled my what was left of my religious beliefs, my Christianity. My beliefs in Christianity was Dan Barker, Losing Faith in Faith. But Godless seems to have the same stuff in it, so I think either one is a good read. He has a little part in here called What About Jesus? And we're just going to assume for a little while that Jesus isn't a fictional character and that he actually lived. What about Jesus? Some Christians will complain that we should not be concerned about the Old Testament deity because Jesus has superseded all of that. The words and actions of Jesus Christ are the perfect role model, they claim. Let's see if that is true. In Luke 12, verses 47 and 48, Jesus said, "And that servant which knew his Lord's will and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that knew not and did commit things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with few stripes." Jesus encouraged the beating of slaves. Is this an example of moral superiority? Some Christians will argue that this is just a parable based on the culture of the day, and that Jesus did not mean it to be taken literally. But an examination of the context proves otherwise. Jesus had just given a parable about servants a few verses earlier, and Peter had asked for an elaboration. Verse 12, verse 41. The quote about beating slaves is in the explanation, not the parable. Besides, what an ugly thing to say. Even if it were a metaphor, it is a poor choice of words. It would be like a politician making an anti-Semitic or black joke and then saying, "I wasn't serious." Why did Jesus, the unrivaled moral example, never once speak out against slavery? Why did the loving, wise Son of God forget to mention that human bondage is a brutal institution? Why did he incorporate it into his teachings, as if it were the most natural thing in the world? I'll tell you why. because he supported it. The Old Testament endorses and encourages slavery, and Jesus, being equal to God, supposedly wrote the old laws, so he had to support slavery. This is not to concede that a man named Jesus actually uttered these words in history. It merely demonstrates that the Gospels were written by human beings who were locked into their cultures. Not only did they refuse to denounce slavery, they could not conceive that there was anything wrong with it. Jesus never spoke out against poverty or did anything to eliminate it. In fact, like Mother Teresa, he taught that the poor should accept their lot in life. In Mark 14, verses 3 through 9, some of Christ's disciples objected to the waste of a costly ointment used to anoint Jesus' head, for it might have been sold for more than 300 pence and have been given to the poor. Jesus responded, "Ye have the poor with you always, and whensoever ye will ye may do them good. But me ye have not." This is selfish and callous. He offers no plan or hope for eliminating poverty and treats feeding the poor as an optional activity that is not as important as worshiping him. Like many modern evangelists who squander contributions from the faithful on lavish lifestyles, or like the Pope who lives in opulence. Where were the wise words of Jesus regarding waste and inequality? Where were the social programs that would lessen poverty? Jesus indicated that he and his followers were a special class above the rest, free to take liberally from the property and work of others. In Mark 2, verse 23, he and his disciples roamed through the cornfields taking what they wanted, which was doubly unlawful since it was the Sabbath. In Matthew 21, Jesus instructed his disciples to take a horse without first asking the owner. This is the kind of attitude that a landlord or king might have adopted toward the peasants. Jesus upheld the Old Testament view of women. Not a single woman was chosen to be among the 12 disciples or to sit at the Last Supper. This is cited as one of the reasons the Pope does not approve of ordaining women. But does he, meaning the Pope, forget that the disciples, besides being male, were also all Jews? How can there be an Italian, Polish, or German Pope, or an Irish bishop, or a Mexican priest? Jesus was violent. He cast some devils into swine, and the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place into the sea and perished in the waters. Matthew 8, verse 32. Why not show a little more respect for life? He also made a whip and threatened to harm the money changers, driving them out of the temple. John 2, verse 15. These were people who were practicing free enterprise, most likely using their profits to provide for their families. More than that, they were offering a service to worshippers who would otherwise be unable to donate to the temple devoted to Jesus' Father, hence to Jesus himself. Was he totally nuts? His violence was tempered with irrationality. Now, in the morning, as he returned into the city, he hungered. And when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it, and found nothing thereon, but leaves only, and said unto it, Let no fruit grow on thee henceforth forever. And presently the fig tree withered away. Matthew 21, verses 18 through 19, repeated in Mark 11, verse 13 through 14, which adds that it was not even fig season. It is is it kind or rational to destroy a plant that happens to be out of season when you are hungry? Is such behavior indicative of mental health? Turn the page. In Luke 19, Jesus told a parable which includes these ruthless words, "But those mine enemies, which would not that I should reign over them, bring them hither, and slay them before me." He is clearly comparing the Lord in the parable to himself. In Matthew 10:34, Jesus said, "I came not to send peace, but a sword." In Luke 22, verses 36, he told his disciples that he that hath no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. He was callous. In Matthew 15:22 through 28, Jesus refused to heal a sick child until the mother pressured him. What if the mother had not been persistent? Would he have withheld his magical favors and let the child die? And why would God have to be asked in the first place? If my children are gravely ill and I don't take them to the hospital and they later ask me why, and I say, "Because you didn't ask me," or "Because you didn't ask me humbly enough," can I be called a good parent? In Matthew 19, verse 12, showing his pro-life sensibilities, Jesus encourages castration. There be eunuchs, which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Modern believers are eager to interpret this verse figuratively. The New International Version loosely and hopefully translates made eunuch as renounced marriage. But the literal meaning is castrate. And many devout Christian men in history have done it to themselves, including the early church father Origen and entire monastic orders. Jesus gives no indication that he is speaking in a parable or that his words mean anything other than what he said. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. This is no moral precept. Castration keeps babies from being born just as effectively as abortion. So why aren't pro-lifers picketing churches that follow Jesus? After all, Jesus never once mentioned abortion, pro or con. He never gave advice to women about how to deal with an unwanted pregnancy. So modern Christians who do give such advice are acting very un-Christ-like. We hear a lot of talk about the humble Jesus, but his words reveal something different. He looked at his disciples with anger. Mark 3, verse 5. He said that he was greater than the temple. Matthew 2, verse 6. Greater than Jonas, parentheses Jonah. Matthew 12, verse 41. And greater than Solomon. He also appeared to suffer from the paranoia that afflicts dictators. He that is not with me is against me. Matthew 12:30. Of course, that is not true. Jesus did not grasp the simple concept of neutrality. Would he also say, "He that is not against me is with me"? But probably the worst of all of Jesus' ideas is the teaching of hell. He did not invent the concept of eternal punishment, but the promotion of the Christian doctrine of hell originated with Jesus. In the Old Testament, hell is just death or the grave. With Jesus, hell became a place of everlasting torment. In Mark 9, verse 43, Jesus said that hell is the fire that never shall be quenched. In Matthew 13, 41 through 42, Jesus gives us a graphic and almost gleeful description of the place he created. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Hitler's gas ovens were horrendous, and the suffering was unspeakable, but they did not burn forever. The murdered victims of the Holocaust suffer no more. But the victims of God's anger will scream forever and ever. I don't believe in Jesus or in God, so I qualify as one of those things that offend. in the above verse. Anyone who thinks it is moral for someone like me, a person who has used reason and kindness to come to conclusions, to be eternally punished for my views, hasn't the faintest concept of morality. Any system of thought or any religion that contains such a threat of physical violence is morally bankrupt. But for this reason alone, Jesus deserves to be denounced as a tyrant. And who could possibly think he was wise? The moral teachings of Jesus include these pearls of wisdom. Don't make any plans for the future, Matthew 6:34. Don't save any money, Matthew 6:19 through 20. Don't become wealthy, Mark 10, verse 21 and 25. Sell everything you have and give it to the poor, Luke 12, verse 33. Don't work to obtain food such as meat because it doesn't last forever, John 6:27. Don't have sexual urges, Matthew 5:28. Marrying a divorced woman is considered adultery, Matthew 5:32. Act in such a way that people will want to persecute you, Matthew 5:11. Let everyone know that you are special and better than the rest, Matthew 5:13 through 14. Hate your family, Luke 14:26. Take money from those who have no savings and give it to the rich investors, Luke 19:23 through 26. If someone steals from you, don't try to get it back, Luke 6, verse 30. If someone hits you, invite them to do it again, Matthew 5:39. If you lose a lawsuit, give more than the judgment, Matthew 5:40. If someone forces you to walk a mile, walk 2 miles, Matthew 5:41. If anyone asks you for anything, give it to them without question, Matthew 5:42. If you do something wrong with your hand, cut it off. And if you do something wrong with your eye, pluck it out, Matthew 5:29 and 30, said in a sexual context. If you are a man, then a good way to make points in the kingdom is to avoid women, Matthew 19, verse 12. Much could be Much could be said about the moral character of other biblical personages, such as Noah, drunkard, Abraham, who lied about his wife, Lot, incestuous father, Moses, a murderer, David, adulterer and murderer, Solomon, polygamist, Peter, who swung swords and lied like a coward, Paul, who told women to keep silent, and many others. Believers could argue that these are mere mortals, that we should expect them sometimes to act according to their corrupt human nature, and that this actually proves the need for a Savior who can love evil creatures in spite of our humanity. Only in a theological context might this be a plausible, if unsatisfactory, response. The fact remains that it is difficult to find consistent examples of moral behavior in the Bible. We might grant the benefit of the doubt to the human characters in the Bible, but why should we expect any better when the deities themselves, God and Jesus, act like thugs or lunatics who ought to be locked up?